afternoon, good evening, good night. The dogs are barking, the winds are blowing. We might lose power, but hey, we're here. This is your Aunty Sochelle in beautiful downtown Vancouver, Washington. Not the pretty Vancouver with the Hollywood movie stars, but the cute Vancouver with so many Walmarts, just too many Walmarts. Today, as I clap because I'm excited, I am going to learn something new because I don't know if you can tell by my blue lips. I'm not a little chilly. I'm a lot chilly, but I'm also a big Doctor Who fan. So I've got my
Oh,
Doctor
yeah.
Who things going, and I've got all my stuff. But there's a whole other world other than us Doctor Who freaks out there. There's a whole world of manga, and our guest today is Miss Helen McCarthy. That's McCarthy with an Athy. Helen, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. I'm here in London, where it's just begun to get really dark. It's around 5 o'clock over here. So by now the night is setting in, but it is so warm. It's crazy. I mean, it's like 17 Celsius still. It ought to be around 11 at this time of year. My
Yeah, for
roses are
those who
still
are
blooming.
unaware, Celsius is like Fahrenheit, except it's smarter. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, it's still 62 Fahrenheit,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this is
which is
this
nuts.
November is well underway. It's insane. It's crazy.
We got the same thing going on here. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, which is also a rainforest, basically.
Oh,
And
wow.
we're having one of our rainstorms happening, which is such a surprise. That never happens here.
No.
So,
Same in
I'm,
London. It
let me
very
move my
rarely
glasses so
rains.
I
Very
can see
rarely
you better
rains in
now.
London. Sometimes
Yeah,
twice a day.
yeah, it's it's just like barely anything. I was so excited to talk to you because I am manga stupid. Which is ridiculous because I'm a big Korean fan. I'm a big
Mhm,
Korean arts fan, a Korean books fan, but I've never read manga. I've never read.
mhm.
For those who are unaware, like myself, us old broads here in the United States who know nothing, uh, do tell me, Helen, what is manga?
Manga is exactly what manhwa is in Korea, or comics are in America, or bande dessinée are in France. It's just the Japanese word that they use for comics, and they use it for all comics locally. I mean, Batman is manga in Japan, and Asterix is manga in Japan, because
Oh my,
manga is just what they call comics. It's really simple, but they have a comic culture like you wouldn't believe. It's so
yeah,
powerful and so diverse and so strong. I mean, there are comics for old broads. There are a ton
that's
of
like
comics.
me.
Like us. There are a ton of comics for old women. There are comics for little kids, very little kids, elementary school kids, and they're so cute. And there are
Aw,
comics for kids of all ages, going all the way through to 95. There are comics for
wow.
guys, there are comics for girls, there are comics for teenage boys, there are comics for young men, there are comics for people who specialize in all sorts of things that we shouldn't discuss on a polite podcast and that we may get to later. Um,
Absolutely. I do no censorship here, so we are perfectly acceptable.
and the great thing about them is they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous. That's a great word, isn't it? Ubiquitous. It sounds
I
like
love
something the
that word.
doctor would say. Or actually, it sounds like someone who'd be one of his enemies. Ubiquitous from the planet idiot. Yes. They are literally everywhere. I mean, if you walk out of customs in an entry airport to Japan,
uh,
within 500 yards, you will pass a booth selling manga,
oh
along
my,
with newspapers and magazines, and it's just ordinary. There are
it's so
comics.
amazing to me that
Ordinary.
visual storytelling
Yeah.
is so new to people. And to me, visual storytelling, cavemen were doing visual
Oh
storytelling.
yeah. Oh
So,
yeah.
so what got, I want to hear a little bit about you too. So tell me a little bit about Helen. So like, were you a little Helen? Were you thinking, I want to draw when I grow up?
No, no. When I was little Helen, I was thinking I'm going to either be an enclosed nun, which was a big thing in Catholic. I come from an Irish Catholic family. Having a son or daughter who is a nun or priest is the greatest blessing God can bestow on you. And my mother
Yes, my
managed to
grandmother was a
avoid it
Scanlon.
8 times. My poor mother didn't get one of us into the church of 8 surviving children. It was
Oh
so
my
bad.
goodness.
But I wanted to be an enclosed nun, or I wanted to be a ballerina, or I wanted to be an astronaut. And I was going to combine all of those with being a writer. Well,
That's
I
brilliant.
didn't have the maths for being an astronaut.
See,
Uh,
I was thinking that a ballerina nun would be kind of cool to watch.
a ballerina would have been fun, but I was one of the very few people in this world who want to be a ballerina and are not actually tall enough.
Aw, you're not tall enough to be a ballerina, and
No,
you.
no.
Aw.
Because standard size. I mean, you're fine being a ballerina if you're 5'2" or 5'3". And of course, nowadays, people like the wonderful Darcy Bussell or Sylvie Guillem can be ballerinas at nearly 6 foot tall. But
Amazing.
below 5 foot, apparently it's really difficult. When they have you in the Nutcracker, you're fine because most of the characters in there are children. But
Yeah.
if one of the Sylphide looks like she's about 12 years old next to all the other Sylphide, it kind of blows the ballet.
And I
So,
guess Swan Lake, you'd end up being a duckling.
yeah, absolutely. Duckling, Signet Lake, it doesn't really work the same.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So anyway, my career options were narrowed down one by one. I discovered sex. Well, I didn't personally discover sex, you
You're
understand.
the one. I was wondering who brought that to light.
It just sort of came up as it does in most of our lives. And I realized that one of the bad things about being any kind of professed religious in the Catholic Church is sex is out. No sex, ever. Not at all. Not even with yourself.
Hmm, that's just not
Yeah,
fun.
that's it. I mean, I've always thought of Jesus as a really
Uh-huh.
laid back, loving, open kind of guy, and I can't
Hung
see
out with
Jesus saying,
prostitutes.
yeah, Jesus wouldn't turn around and say, "No sex, girl," but the Catholic Church does. So anyway, I thought to myself, what am I going to do? But my number two plan with all of these, my fallback plan, because my parents dinned into us, you get
Uh,
a day job. You know, you're creative, you're artistic, you whatever you do, but you get a day job because you
yeah,
want your own roof over your own head, and you don't want to be relying on somebody else to pay your rent for you because that way disaster lies. So
exactly.
my day job, you'll love this. My day job was utterly practical. I was going to be a writer.
That's perfect. Hey, I know. I'm going to go into soccer.
Yeah, if I may not succeed as a nun or a ballerina or an astronaut, but that's fine. I'm going to be a writer.
Yeah, that's perfectly.
But anyway,
We all know how stable that is.
yeah, absolutely, and how lucrative it is. Well, but
Yeah.
I kind of over the years I got day jobs. Obviously, I've always worked right up to retirement, and thank God for that because I now have enough of a pension income not to worry.
Good for you.
But alongside it, I wrote, and first of all, I wrote within fandom. I became a Trek fan the minute I saw Star Trek. And
Oh,
I was very active in British fandom. Of course, I was a Doctor Who fan, but Who fandom back in my day, which was a long, long, long time ago,
well,
it was
Tom
kind
Baker
of,
was my first doctor, so yeah,
he was so lovely. But
yeah.
Who fandom wasn't very, how should I put this? Like a lot of male dominated fandoms, it wasn't a place where women were allowed to do anything apart from shut up and look admiring. And that was what was great about Trek fandom. Trek fandom was ours. Trek fandom belonged to girls in Britain from the word go. It was great. We've got this.
Yeah,
We know it. We run this. That's fine. So I got into slash fiction. I got into fanzines, and I did all the things that people do in fandoms. And I was
that's
really
wonderful. Did
enjoying
you have the
it.
little Star Trek skirt that went up to your belly button?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course you
well,
did.
I was a costumer from the word go because I've always loved historical costume, and it was just an extension of that. So and
My
I
sewing machine at this moment has a Renaissance fair costume sitting on it.
Oh, wow. I love historic dress. I recreate historic dress a lot. But
See, I knew we'd get one.
oh, we could go forever. But I did a load of Trek costumes for the conventions we had, and I was just having a lot of fun there. And as that one thing led to another, I began to meet people. You know how you do at cons, you meet people in other fandoms? Because
Yeah,
none of us are, it's not like being an enclosed nun. You can have more than one fandom. Who knew?
there's there's the Farscape people. Oh, look, Alex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so gradually, bit by bit, I began to meet people with other contacts. And I began to think about other fandoms too. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Jerry and Sylvia Anderson's Super Mario Nation,
Oh,
Thunderbirds,
wow.
and UFO and Space 1999, that sort of thing. And
Oh,
we
yeah.
started, a group of us started the fandom for Super Mario Nation because Jerry and Sylvia had both been, Sylvia went to America after their divorce, and Jerry had not been successful since. And we just started a new fandom. and said to people, look how great this stuff is. You really ought to be paying attention to this stuff, you know. And that was quite successful, as you can see now. And luckily, Jerry went on to have another son, Jamie, who is now carrying the banner of his fandom. Yeah, who knew? That was another surprise.
That was the Amazon dog bark. We can have a doorbell. We have Amazon dogs. Hey, doggies, settle down. Go to your beds. I'll hear nothing from you for the rest of the day. All right.
Anyway, through all this, I was still, you know, being social, still meeting people, still getting around the way one does in real life. And I met a guy. Now, I met a lot of guys. I'm not going to disguise it. My youth was entertaining.
Well, you're an attractive lady, so my guess would be, go girl.
Well, in my experience, being outgoing, energetic, interested in most people, and not wearing many clothes will always make you popular.
And thus is Carrie Fisher's career.
Absolutely. But it was really interesting meeting this guy, because he just left art college. He graduated as an illustrator, and he and his friends had been to Spain. And in Spain, which is a country with a great comic culture of its own, they'd encountered manga and anime on TV. And
that's brilliant.
He was showing me the stuff that he liked, all his passions, his monsters, his Hammer horror films, his
I bet you he showed you your monsters.
And he showed me this manga stuff. And so, this is Japanese. This isn't Spanish, even though it's all in Spanish. It's just
the kaiju culture, sure.
It's Japanese. And I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. What got me was I've always been all about telling stories. And these were stories that, reading no Spanish, I could get a fair idea of just from the line. And it's a way of telling stories without words. It's going back to what you were saying about cave paintings, a way of painting things on the wall and making
visual storytelling is beautiful.
Thrilling. It's just thrilling. The idea that you can speak to people across space, across time, without language. And I thought, I'm going to find out more about this. Now, at the time, I worked for the National Library of the UK, the British Library.
Oh, that sounds very proper.
It meant that I was very plugged into every kind of way you could find books. No problem. And I could not find a single book in the English language on manga. And that was this was 1981, and it was even exploring the Library of Congress catalogue, because obviously libraries talk to each other all over the world. It's like a big secret society. Library of Congress, no, haven't got anything like that. I found a few references in world histories of animation, which were mostly histories of animation written by American or Canadian or British scholars.
Yeah, there's a lot of Canadian books about anime. Yeah, the Alexius. I'm an animator too, so I totally know that. Yeah.
They were writing about Western animation.
Right.
And every now and then you come across 3 lines saying Japanese animation. There's a bit of it, but it's mostly like Saturday morning kids stuff, and it's pretty rich.
Kimba.
You don't want to bother with it. Yeah, Kimba.
Yeah.
But before Kimba. Yeah. And you don't want to bother with it, really, apart from this guy called Tezuka, who makes some quite good art house films when he's not wasting his time on commercial stuff, and this other guy who makes some really good puppet film. But don't worry. So
I love the puppet stuff. Oh, okay.
But this whole medium that excited me so much, anime manga, dismissed in 3 lines. Do you know that prior to about the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was not a single academic paper in English on manga, apart from one done in 1977 by a lady anthropologist who'd been given, I think she was at UTD, but it might have been UT Austin. She'd been given a manga book to look at, and she was looking at it from the point of view of, what does this tell me about the Japanese people? She was looking at it as an anthropologist.
Wow.
And she didn't have
so it's a social science experiment and not an art experiment.
And that was the very first paper. And after that, nobody took much interest until we started to get fandom in America, in Britain, in Japan, pushing forward and saying,
what do you think sparked that? What do you think was the first big push?
The first big push was probably in the US with the fandom for Star Blazers. which was a Japanese animated show that was redubbed and renamed, and all the things they used to do to these things. But
Yeah, the giant robo, and yeah.
it came on at tea time. It came on at that point where kids would just have got home from junior high or elementary school, and they'd be sitting eating their snacks and looking for something to distract them, and their mother would turn on the TV and say, "Stop bothering me, go and watch your shows."
See,
And
now my husband is 50 years old. He's way younger than me, which is kind of fun. But he started with Ultraman. Ultraman is this big thing. We have Ultraman all over his room.
a lot of people in the areas where Ultraman was shown got Ultraman as well. But
Yeah.
those few Japanese shows that trickled through, and Star Blazers was big because it was picked up by people on the convention scene. And by 1978, 79, there were people going to science fiction conventions that previously had been, quite restricted to literary fandom, and cosplaying characters from anime and manga. And that started to get very interesting. There were a lot of waves of fandom after that. You know how sometimes it goes in waves when you're getting established, and anime and manga would be really big for a while, and then they'd die off, and then there'd be the next big thing, and then they'd die off. And then in 1990, a movie called Akira hit in America like a ton of very brightly colored bloodstained bricks. That movie had a British video company racing out to acquire the rights for Akira. And that was Manga Entertainment, which of course later became a mainly American company, and now I think belongs to one of a chain of a conglomerate. Who can keep track these days of who?
I know, everybody owns, all the big people own the bigger things. Yeah.
Disney owns half the world through America, and Sony owns the other half of the world through Japan, and all the little things interlace. Yeah, that's it. But that got things going. And at the time, I was really engaged and really interested, and I was running a little newsletter about anime and manga. And so I actually got to found a magazine, thanks to an incredible publisher who said, "I don't know what this is, but it looks like fun, and I will give you the money to publish a professionally distributed magazine about it."
All that library education served you well.
Well, it didn't in some ways, because knowing nothing, I didn't know what I couldn't do. So I thought, let's just do everything. And we really did a good job. We ran it for 6 years before finally our ambition outran our budgets and our sales, and then we collapsed. But we did a great job, and it was a little thing called Anime UK, and we were proud of it, and we loved it. And over that time, people got more and more interested and more engaged, and things got bigger and bigger. And so gradually we got into the 21st century. Now, the two good things about the 21st century, apart from the fact that we all survived to see it, and we're still hanging on in the earth.
Who knows? Every day it could change. Yeah.
Who knows? Yes. But the really good thing about it is that technology had begun to catch up with human ambition. Around 2005, 50% of people in the developed world were online. And that was the first tipping point, because people could now start sharing things online and downloading things online. More and more people had computers. And
Isn't it amazing? I mean, I studied animation of people in the 1800s, the 1890s, and the 1900s, before film was a thing, really, the puppet animations and all that. And seeing stuff online that I had never seen before, or even heard before, like the audio files from Europe that I'd never heard before, from the early 1900s. Amazing.
When you think about how we used to do things as scholars, we used to have books, and we used to have some contacts with other scholars, but not easy and immediate contacts, because you wrote a letter and you put it in the mail and you waited for an answer, and maybe you got a photocopy back with new stuff. And maybe if you're really lucky, you got to speak to somebody on the telephone or at a conference.
That's one of those old-timey things where people actually talk to each other through a noisy thing, and they talk back. Yeah.
Or you would make a trip to your work, or your institution would send you to a conference, and there you'd meet other scholars from parts of the world you'd never even dreamed of. Now, of course, now that broadband has come in, you can be standing in a street in Kinshasa in Africa with your smartphone in your hand, and you can download every anime ever made, as long as you've got enough money to keep funding your connection.
Well, you could sit here in Portland and talk to somebody in the UK.
Yeah. And that's where it really exploded. That's where anime and manga got as big as they are today, because everybody, it's like the movie title, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
Everybody who
Yes.
was interested in this could suddenly just dip a toe in the water, and for just the cost of their phone connection, could
Mm.
see what it was all about and decide if they wanted to go further. And it doesn't matter if I'm in Saudi Arabia and you're in Portland, or you're in India, or you're wherever. We can
Mm.
talk together. We can sit there typing down the line to each other if we can't
That's
do dial up. And we can say, here's this really cool anime I found. Here's this really cool manga I found. Here's this great book you might not have heard of yet. And we can
yeah.
just communicate. And that's where it all comes from. That's how
I
it
would
gets
never have
started.
heard of Studio Ghibli if it had not been for my friend going to Japan and bringing me back a VHS or something
Yeah.
from, in the late
VHS.
1990s.
When we
Yeah.
used to watch things on tapes.
Yes.
Wasn't that
Yes. I still have 8 millimeter projectors around here because I still
oh,
get 8 millimeter sent to me. So
it's really strange because now I tour the UK, doing a couple of talks every month about various aspects of anime, mostly Studio Ghibli, because that's mostly what people want. And
sure.
when I say to audiences that here I am showing you this presentation streamed off my laptop with like 200 images, I can remember a time when I would have had to bring a big old clunky machine with a carousel of slides and
Uh-huh.
slide them back and forward, and that would have been fun, but not quite as easy.
And you'd hear the
Yeah,
between every slide.
that's exactly. And I cannot believe that just in my lifetime, technology has gone so far that now we can basically have what we want.
Well, as an animator, I got to tell you, I studied on film doing paper
Yeah,
with three pegged boards, and I would
yeah,
roll. I still have my light table. I would roll my light table and draw and copy over it, and roll and draw and copy over it, and then I'd flip
yeah,
my paper to test,
yeah.
and then I'd shoot each individual frame. Now, instead of it taking 4.5 weeks to do, 6 seconds of stuff, I can go three buttons in and I'm done with the exact same piece of
Yeah,
animation on,
it's
software. It's
it
insane
is
to me.
phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. And a guy called Makoto Shinkai, who became the new Hayao Miyazaki for a while, not that there'll ever be a new Hayao Miyazaki, but that was the label people gave him because
Yeah.
PR is basically a repetitive language. But he loved animation, but he was actually working in advertising, and he got a computer at home, which,
Oh,
again, that sounds casual. That's who doesn't have a computer at home? But he could afford a computer at home because he had a good job. And then he could liberate some high-end software packages from his work in advertising animation. So he went
that,
home and he made his first films, yeah, just like you, on his own,
yeah.
at home,
Yeah.
on his computer. And from there, he got a whole career in animation. He didn't go to animation school. He didn't go to art school. He just taught himself how to do it on the packages. And right this minute, African anime is a thing. And there are kids
Uh-huh.
all over Africa making movies with software on their smartphones. And that's,
I love that.
poverty has stopped being as huge an issue of it as it was for many people. It's still a
Isn't
huge
it amazing?
people are still poor, but if you've got a smartphone, there are all sorts of ways you can finagle your way out of poverty, and making animation is one of them. It's incredible.
Flip a clip, free software, flip a clip. You do, I mean, silly free software packages exist.
And you
That,
don't even need a software package. You can go on TikTok and just use the tools they have on there and make
yeah.
yourself famous.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. But in
Yeah.
all that, the thing that gets me about manga and that keeps me going back to manga is that really good manga creators have the one thing that matters at the heart, and that's the story.
Yeah.
Because you can draw as beautifully as you like, but if you can't convince people of the story in your images, that those beautiful drawings have eyes that engage them and expressions that engage them, you're never going to get anywhere telling stories. You make a great fine artist, possibly.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Stories are the foundation of everything that people do in manga. And whether they're just little crazy 4-panel throwaway gags that they call yonkoma, or whether
Hmm.
they're huge, great 70-volume epics of whatever story you want to tell, the
Uh-huh.
story is at the heart of it. And so a mangaka, someone who makes manga, either
Mm.
has to they don't even have to be a good artist. They have to be a great storyteller.
Yeah.
They have to
Because you want to
work,
draw people in.
yeah, or they have to work with a great storyteller. And there are a lot of examples of teams of superlative, fantastic, wonderful, gifted artists who can't tell a story to save their lives.
Oh, I hate
They
that.
team up with the right writer for them, and
Yeah.
that makes them both more powerful than they were alone.
You get that Elton John with that Bernie Taupin and
That's
boom.
it. Or that Hayao Miyazaki with that Isao Takahata. Takahata couldn't draw. He could do, thumbnail sketches, but he never drew. He said his job was to find the team that could bring
Oh,
his directorial vision to life. And
makes
originally
it different.
Miyazaki worked with him as his number 2 and senior artist.
It's
And
amazing.
they were a combination made in heaven. Yeah.
That was amazing. And just I actually have just finished reading the Miyazaki I don't want to say memoir because he didn't write it, but yeah, the biography.
Yeah.
And just reading the stories about how they, got involved with each other. When you're reading stories, there's a lot of a trope in film, and there's a lot of trope in animation. Is there a lot of trope in manga?
There is. But where manga really scores is that it's trope used in a way that the West is not familiar with. We're
Ah,
real novelty hounds. We're always saying, give me new, shiny, shiny. And the tropes of manga are tropes we've left behind. They ought not to be, because in fact, a lot of the tropes of manga were built in the years after the West flooded into Japan, when it got education from Germany and France and Britain. And people suddenly started wearing school uniforms and being educated and going to boarding schools or standard schools. And they used an awful lot of educational material from the West in translation. The
oh,
first novel translated into Japanese from English was Tom Brown's School Days, which is a famous Victorian novel about a boy in a boarding school in Victorian England. And for many, many years, I think for about 25 years after it was translated, the chapters about cricket were missing because nobody in Japan could get their head around cricket enough to be able to understand and
you
translate.
take a bat and you what?
Well, we told them, don't worry, the Americans still can't do it. We've been telling them
No.
for years, but and so many books were translated because the Japanese, they had a great literary culture of their own, and they had a very literate population for the time, for the 1850s. But they were hungry for more. They wanted to learn everything they could about these people who'd suddenly come into their country and were exploiting them left, right, and center, it has to be said, because we are all Brits, Americans, French, Germans. We're shameless colonists and we exploit the
That's
strip
the
mine
sad
opportunities.
truth. Yes.
But the Japanese thought, we're going to learn everything we can about these people so that we can be in a better position to deal with them. And so as
And
a
it
result, floods of novels translated,
oh,
floods of
brilliant.
work translated, and they began to get comics. A guy called Charles Wordman, who was a
Mm.
fourth generation, I think, Swedish emigrant to Britain, but he was British as they come, very proper guy.
Uh,
He went over there because he was a younger son, and his brother was already progressing very well in the Royal Academy, and he wanted to make his own mark. So he went to
yes.
China
Why
for.
can't you be more like your brother? It gets a little boring to hear after a
And
fashion.
he said,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to China to be a foreign correspondent. So there. And he went over to China and he was a foreign correspondent for a while. And then he picked up a commission from the Illustrated London News, because he was also a very fair artist,
Nice.
to go and work in Japan. Because back then, of course, there was no photography in the press. The only thing
Right.
we had were engravings. And so
Right.
he
And
went
they're
out.
beautiful. There's some beautiful pieces out there.
Well, he went out, and for the Illustrated London News, he did the most astonishing series of illustrations that were then engraved for reports. But he also got into partnership with a guy called Felice Beato, and the two of them set up Japan's first photographic studio. And they
Oh,
started
that's
selling shots of old Japan, posed samurais and posed building, to tourists who would go back to America or England or France and say, hey, look what I saw, and show you their photo album.
oh, that's so
A
cool.
lot of the shots that you will see online from the very early 1860s, around then, are
Yeah.
Felice Beato and Charles Workman. But Workman had another sideline. He started a satirical magazine
Oh, fun.
based on the London Punch. And the idea was that every month he put out an issue, handwritten and hand illustrated by him, lampooning all the different foreigners in Japan and talking
That's
about their
great.
social events and their pretentious. It was kind of, if you think of Monty Python in
Yeah.
Victorian times, that's what it was. And this thing,
I'm
and
just fashioning the youngins talking around there. They came into town today.
yes, and when he did it, when you think about it, he had to get it all done on wood blocks. He had to get it carved into wood blocks by local artisans and print. But it sold for, I think it was about 35 years, all over Asia. It was
Wow.
really popular, and it started Japanese people doing their own satirical magazines. And he taught a lot of people cartooning, and he also taught a lot of people Western style painting. And at the
Now, what's
same
the difference between cartooning and illustration then?
cartooning does it for satire or
Mhm.
for social purposes. Illustration does it to say, here's a picture of a nice lady arranging flowers in a Japanese vase.
Yeah.
Whereas cartooning would say, here's a lady arranging flowers in a Japanese vase, but look what a mess she looks.
Everything's nice except for her. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it was amazing how quickly that spread. And of course, at the same time, people going backwards and forwards from America, from Europe, from Russia to Japan to China, they were all getting on these big ocean liners. And these big ocean liners had to keep people occupied while they were on the 4 or 5 or whatever, however long a voyage it was. I think it took something like 10 weeks from Japan to America,
Wow.
depending on your route. So, of course, they carried stacks of newspapers. So people would have at least something to read and something to do crosswords with. And these newspapers had cartoons. So every port, they'd pick up the new newspaper. So you'd have Italian cartoons, French cartoons, and of course, American cartoons, German cartoons, English cartoons, all flowing into Japan. And
Brilliant.
Japanese people started to look at these. I mean, there's a lot of argument among manga scholars about what are the roots of manga. Some
Mhm.
scholars will take you all the way back to Japanese printed books of the 16th and 17th
I
century.
was gonna say, weren't there some amazing scrolls that were kind of art
Manga
and
scrolls, yes, of the 12th century, even further. I think the first actually funny drawings you find in Japan were done on the back of ceiling boards at a temple renovation in 754 of the Christian era.
wow.
And they were only discovered in 1945 when said temple was bombed and badly burnt and had to be renovated. Um,
Amazing.
but we've got the human impulse to make drawings and to make caricatures and to tell stories, and then we've got this country that's been shut off for quite a while, and literate and artistic people, even common people, porters and so on, would buy woodblock prints to paste up in their digs because they like
Sure.
that artist. Yeah, just like buying a poster nowadays.
That's
You
yeah.
are of my vintage, so you will probably remember that poster that every guy you knew had on his dorm room digs about of a young woman with a tennis bat and a tennis ball scratching a totally naked
Yes.
arse. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Our Farrah Fawcett.
yeah. Or Farrah
Yep.
Fawcett hair. Prints at the time, woodblock prints of actresses and beauties and things like that were so popular. And there was a big, even though Japan was totally enclosed and Japanese people were forbidden on pain of death from going outside Japan, there was a big tourist industry within Japan. So people collected woodblock prints of the places they'd been. So they could
That's
save their,
amazing.
and they weren't expensive. You could get them for, if you could afford to travel and you were cutting back a bit, you'd stay in digs in temples. You still had a
Uh-huh.
few pennies for a woodblock print wherever you went. So you could
Yeah,
go
they were like
there.
postcards.
Yeah,
They were,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
You would go home
amazing.
and say to all your friends, look at all these places I've seen, look at this temple, look at this bridge, look at this castle. And they go, wow, well traveled.
Yeah.
Just doing what you do. So all of that was there. And all of that history, and then this sudden impact and inrush of creative explosion from the outside world, Americans, American newspapers, Germans, German cartoons, all those ideas came into Japan and they started people making manga. And of course,
Wow.
there was a fly in this ointment. There is always a fly in human-made ointment, and the fly in the
Naturally.
ointment was, of course, that Japan decided that it wasn't going to be left behind in the colonization stakes. It was going to imitate all these big Western countries and persuade the rest of Asia that they needed Japan to help them get out from under the yoke of these foreigners.
Sure.
And to be fair,
Sure.
that wasn't entirely without merit, if only the Japanese hadn't decided to do imperial colonization the way the English and the Americans and everybody else did it, which is the wrong way. Um,
Yeah.
because everywhere white people went, whether it was arriving in America to save the souls of the Indians they proceeded to massacre, or whether it was going to India to exploit the people there and their textiles, we've always
Sure.
gone looking for cheap labor and cheap materials, and we've never given any regard to the people who are actually the owners of that cheap
And
labor.
it still does that with the, the technological
Oh yeah,
technological age. Very much so.
more and more. I mean, to be a writer or a creator nowadays, in the face of AI, is
Yeah.
to be a slave being ripped off. But we'll
Oh,
get.
we are 100% agreed on that.
But that diverts us from the wrongdoings of our fathers, which are always easier, aren't they? The
Yeah.
wrongdoings of our fathers are more fun.
Right. They're so blatant.
It
Then
doesn't
we,
matter.
80 years from now, they look back at us going, "You guys were so blatant."
Well, but the thing is, at least I think now we are, most artists talking are not saying we're bringing you enlightenment. We're saying we're borrowing whatever we can from you, and we will try not to rip you off too much because we know how that goes. But we're still, we're in the same position. All artists share with each other and borrow from each other and borrow from every culture all over the globe.
Sure. They
And
call
that's,
them reference images.
yeah. But
Yeah.
we are not, absolutely not, supposed to be ripping that off to train our AI so that we can make mega millions and make the peons unnecessary, which is what's happening now.
Yes, yes. Well, in animation, as
You're in
voice
that.
actors and animators and everything, I mean, my career went from, doing well enough to now it's like, okay, what will I do this week? Yep.
Well, there's a whole other conversation that we'll maybe have at a later date about how AI is impacting anime and impacting other animators around the world, because that's quite
And
getting
game
quite
makers
scary.
and oh yeah,
But
yeah.
manga was affected by Japan's imperial ambitions,
Mm,
in that the West started looking at Japan and saying, "Excuse me, we're the colonizers around here. You're not supposed to be doing this. And what's more, you're going into quite a lot of places where we have interests. We have cheap materials, we have cheap labor. We're not sure we like your idea of liberating Asia, either
mhm.
because you're not actually liberating Asia, you're just making it part of the Japanese empire, and
Right.
because nobody's going to liberate Asia because that absolutely fucks with our bottom line."
That's right.
Yeah,
How dare you make it so that everything else is cheaper everywhere else?
yeah,
No.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the war happened,
Yeah.
the Pacific War and the World War. And during that time, it wasn't a good time to be a creative in Japan. I mean, it
Right.
wasn't a good time to be anything anywhere because most places were getting bombed. And the
Yeah.
places that weren't getting bombed, like India and Australia, were sending their young men over to us to get bombed in Europe,
Right?
which was. I mean, I saw a British comic this week about the contribution that Indian and Pakistani troops made. I suppose we have to say Indian troops because Pakistan didn't exist then, but the
Ah,
contribution that those troops made in the First World War, where they all showed up to fight for the empire against the Hun. And I thought, finally, we're getting pop culture acknowledgement of how
recognition.
heroic these
Our
people
editor
were.
is from Pakistan.
Yeah,
That's
it,
great.
it's it's
It's
just it's something that has not been acknowledged much, and I'm glad it's being acknowledged now. But
finally.
Japan didn't have a good war, I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah, the
But
Koreans would agree.
yeah, but creative people had even more challenging times because they were expected to join the government propaganda machine. And
Mm.
anyone who would not join the government propaganda machine was generally drafted and sent somewhere unpleasant like the Pacific Front. So it didn't actually pay you to resist the government too much. And a huge number of young people in all over the world, but in Japan, like all over the world, who were sent to war didn't
Mm.
actually come back. And a
Yeah.
huge number of young people came back with damage, with injuries. One of my favorite mangaka, the late Shigeru Mizuki, who died aged 91 a couple of years ago, having been both a great folklore scholar and a great comic creator.
Mm.
He went out there at the age of 22, drafted, no, 21, sorry, drafted with a platoon. He came back the only member of his platoon to have survived Leyte. He got gangrene in one arm after an unfortunate incident with shrapnel. That
Mm.
arm had to be amputated. It was his left arm, but unfortunately, he was left handed.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, so he came back to a defeated Japan, having to learn all over again how to write and draw with his right hand,
Right down.
into a family where one brother had already been arrested as a war criminal because he'd been a fairly low-level officer, but he had been an officer nonetheless.
Yeah.
A devastated country where people were not actually starving, but some people did starve, and it was very close. And he suddenly had to find himself a job. And I love this. He became a cinema projectionist. One of his
That's
gigs
so
was
cool.
those huge, yeah, but you think one arm and those huge old reels.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know
not
how.
easy to move those things.
Yeah. And on the side, he was drawing pictures for a Japanese art form called kamishibai, which essentially is paper theatre. You have a stand with pictures and you withdraw the pictures and tell a story. And eventually he made his way into manga. But times were
Wow.
really, really tough. And times were even tougher for the kids who were left behind after the war because
Yeah.
they'd had several years when, like, if like Miyazaki, they were born in 41, they'd known nothing but war.
Right.
Takahashi was 5 years older, so he had vague recollections of a Japan without war, but it had been
Barely.
hot for most of his life.
Yeah.
Um, those kids had nothing, and they couldn't afford anything, and most of their parents, unless their parents had been either very crafty or very lucky, had
Yeah.
nothing. And so comics, which could be bought for a few pennies, or even better, rented, because a lot of entrepreneurs started
Oh,
little rental joints renting
yeah,
out.
I saw that. I have friends in Japan that actually friends in Korea that have a shop that just rents their
Yeah,
books.
that's it.
That's all they do.
Because who
Yeah.
can afford all the comics they want to read? If you've got, especially if you've got a couple of kids who are both comic mad, how are you going
Mhm.
to keep them in what they want? Well, in Japan, you
Right.
buy them one big anthology each and let them get on with it because they're 250 pages and they're fine. But rental was the answer. And so many kids were renting comics. And so many people who had no jobs because the economy was flatlined looked at comics and thought, if I can work up stories that I can turn around quickly enough and do enough of them in a week and sell
Mhm.
them to the publishers who are desperate for this, then I can put some kind of food on the table. And maybe we can rent somewhere to live that isn't a leaky shack. And a lot of people started doing that. They started working for the rental industry and then worked their way up to working for publishers. And
That's
all of
amazing.
this started to form the ecosystem of Japanese comics. And
That's amazing.
it moves with technology and it moves with social advance as well. Because
Mhm.
as America and Britain, we recovered okay from the war. I mean, we were still paying you guys the money we borrowed to survive the war right up till 2020, 2015 or 16, I think. But we were okay. France
Yeah.
recovered, Germany recovered, Italy
Right.
recovered, everywhere recovered. Japan was still having real trouble in the mid 70s. There were huge vacant lots that they couldn't afford to build on. Well, cities in Britain were like that. Liverpool had vacant lots till the 90s from wartime bombing. Um,
Wow.
but they were scrabbling desperately around, and there wasn't a lot for kids to do. There wasn't a lot of entertainment for kids, but there were comics. And there started to be, now you know this because you've been in fandom. Fandoms get very edgy with each other. There's
Yes.
always in groups and out groups. And there was a particular group that was running a comic event in Tokyo, the only one. And it was a comic event that brought both the professionals and the fans together. And fans had started to make their own comics. Fans were doing their own little comic storybooks. And
Sure.
a group of fans felt that this professional, semi-pro convention, I suppose you'd say it was like San Diego, that
Uh-huh.
but on a small scale, that they were favoring the pros at the expense of the fans. And they thought,
Yeah.
we don't like this. We are going to sort this. We are going to have our own comic event that will be only for fans. It will be only staffed by volunteers.
That's brilliant.
We will just do it for fans and we'll see where we can go. And that is Comic-Ep today.
Wow.
They
I see.
started out,
I had no
yeah,
realization of that. That's
they
amazing to
started
me.
out with I think about 200 people came to their first event, which was in a little, like, the equivalent of a church hall or a school hall.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Just a few fold-out tables and some
yeah,
chairs.
that's
Sure.
it, and people, but only for people who were making their own comics. No
Nice.
pros allowed. And as
Nice.
time went on, of course, pros came in because they wanted to scout. And pros were eventually allowed to have stands to make scouting easier. And then they expanded to have, different areas. They have people who make clothes for dolls, they have people who do garage kits, they have people who do their own animation. But Comic is still entirely volunteer run. The
That's brilliant.
only staff they have are the doctor and the nurse practitioner that the Tokyo city government insists
They have to
on.
have by law, sure.
Everybody else is still doing it for love. And they
the
now
the
have
the growth of the I'm just as I'm cutting you off, I'm sorry.
no,
The
no,
growth of the comic designs in themselves, for those who are in film, storytelling as a storyboard
oh
came
yeah,
from this as well. It didn't
oh yeah,
come from just like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a movie, let's draw what we're gonna do, and we're gonna put it out there. It came from watching these drawings. It's oh, you can tell a story by drawing pictures and have the story match these pictures, and now we're going to make a movie about it. I mean, storyboarding really came from that.
yeah, exactly. And that again, that points its primacy. It's a storyboard. It's not a script board. It's a
Right.
storyboard. It tells the story visually. And Japanese comics evolved to the stage where you can tell any story. I mean, one of my absolute favorites, which I always wish could be translated, it hasn't been, and which I
Mm,
definitely wish that someone like Netflix or Sony would pick up, is a
right.
story called Orkin no Monsho, which translates as the seal of the royal family.
Wow.
And now the elevator pitch that I do for this is Bridgerton in the ancient Near and Middle East with loads of hot young princes with very few clothes and a 17-year-old time traveling genius heroine. How can that fail?
I'd be in. I'd be wishing I was 17 really fast.
It is, of course, made by a woman.
Naturally.
Yoko Hosokawa started to make this manga, the 70s, and it's still running. It's the
That's
longest
amazing.
running girls' manga in history. Um,
That's so cool.
she's 90 years old now, and she doesn't do a lot of drawing anymore, but she has her daughter and her granddaughters to help her.
So
And
she didn't even start when she was in her 20s. If she was started in the
well,
90s, I
she
mean,
started in her 20s because she didn't start this in her 20s, but
oh,
she was doing other comics before. She's
oh,
had
okay, gotcha.
very successful Japanese live action dramas based on her comics, but she's
Wow.
always been very protective of Okinomon show. She worked on it with her sister for a while, then with her daughter, then with her granddaughters, and now she essentially dictates her own pace. You know, the company says, "We're really sorry, but Hosokawa Sensei can't do very much at the moment, so the next volume may be a while." And the fans say, "Hey, go with it, that's fine."
Yeah.
And honestly, this thing is so hot. This beautiful young American girl from a very rich family who is also a genius, better than
Mm.
Indiana Jones at what Indiana Jones does,
Take that,
has
Laura
nothing
Croft.
for archaeology, and her
Yeah.
parents can indulge her by helping her out, to visit digs and so on. And one day she is pulled into ancient Egypt and meets an undocumented but really convincing pharaoh called Memphis. And the pair of them
Wow.
fall madly in love with the opposition of his sister wife, Isis, who wants to keep him all to herself and who is determined to kill this interloper. But unfortunately, as Memphis's position in the greatest empire that the world had ever seen at that stage means that he
Sure.
gets into touch with a lot of other kings and princes and diplomatic envoys of high rank, means that Carol, in her new incarnation as an Egyptian princess, gets to meet every hot man in the whole of the ancient Near and Middle East, and they all fall in love with her.
Oh, I
So,
love it.
you can see how this story could run and run. But
Oh, sure.
there are so many stories like that. There are manga about Richard the First of England and his opposition to the great Islamic leader Saladin. There are manga about Richard the Third of England. There's been one recently called Requiem for a Rose King that essentially says that Richard is a person he's been abused in childhood. He's got very complex family interrelationships, and he also has a complex personal sexual profile. And this
Well,
is
that would explain a
why
lot.
England went the way it did.
Oh,
It's well, honestly, if we are defined by so many of our ruling families' sexual profiles.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
let's not. But enough about Andrew.
enough about Andrew Edi. There's a wonderful manga by a woman called Yuha Shibe. Um,
Mhm.
in the 70s, she started a manga based on the life of a Celtic tribe opposing the Romans in Britain
Wow.
called Crystal Dragon. And it's got a really conflicted heroine and a really conflicted and very nasty, dark bad guy who isn't so bad after all and is quite romantic and who is fallen in love with by many readers. And it's got the Romans and it's got Celtic tradition. It's epic. And then more
Isn't it wonderful that stories don't make things black and white? I love that, you know, there's no good versus bad necessarily, like that so many, oh, you're wearing a black hat, you're a bad guy, you're in a white hair, you're a good girl. I mean, it's just every human being is complex and every story should be just as complex. There's no nuance if it's all except for Trump. We all know he's the bad guy.
well,
There's just no way
wouldn't it
around
be
that.
wonderful if we could wake up and find that he was just invented by somebody for the purposes of a long running manga?
We have this nightly ritual where my husband and I both look, we don't have children, both look in our phones and we look at each other. Is he dead yet? Nope. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The House
that's
of
it.
Windsor has been doing that with Andrew, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure.
He is, alas, a healthy 66-year-old. No, I shouldn't say alas. Wishing somebody dead is always really complicated because apart from
Yeah.
anything else, you don't know what psychic waves it's going to send out into the universe. I
Yeah.
think this is one of the things that manga often shows us. If you get a long, complex manga story where you've got complicated people doing good and bad things all the way through, you start, I think, to get an idea that many of us have to wait a very long time in our lives and had lots of experience to get, that people are this very complicated thing. And if you take now that bad guy at the point
Mhm.
at which you were first throwing the book across the room and saying, for fuck's sake, somebody kill him, you will
Yes.
actually have prevented these things that have happened that have actually been really positive. He is still an appalling guy. You still don't like him
But
at all.
he's the rock and he's the pebble in the shoe
That's
that
it.
makes people redesign the shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Or he is the butterfly wing, without
yeah.
which China would not have had the rain it needs for its rice paddies.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've learned from all the books I've loved and that I continue to learn from the manga I love is that it is impossible to sit people in a box. They constantly surprise you, they annoy you, they
Yeah.
make you tear your hair out, they make you wonder what you ever saw in them sometimes, but they constantly have the capacity to reinvent themselves.
Yeah. There's always I I the word always is hard for me because I don't like the word always.
Yeah,
Um, you often I do, always is hard. But I will say the word always, there's always a mystery in somebody's eyes that you
yeah.
don't know the answer to.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very
Um,
definitely.
and my husband cracks me up because when he's mad at somebody, he's mad at them. When I get mad at somebody, the first thing I thought, okay, what was mad about their day today that made them act like that?
Yeah. But you
I go to a different plane than he
are,
does.
because we are all creatures of our environment, very
Yeah,
much so, we get mad because somebody does something that we take personally, which in
yeah.
fact was not intended personally at all, and it's just a case.
Or you don't get it. Let's say there's random thing. You don't get an email back from somebody you haven't heard from in like 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay, turns out they were going through cancer surgery. They had a baby. They had this. They had that. You're like, you
Yep.
were not the first thing on their mind.
But although I think it is true that when your friendship with somebody is really deep, when you cannot see each other or communicate for a couple of years and you pick up the conversation exactly where it left and neither
Yes.
side resents it.
Yes. One of our
You,
guests that's coming up tomorrow that I'm talking to is like that. One of the comedians I
you
work
are
with.
in my life and I don't need you to be constantly hovering around me for you to be in my life. It's enough
Exactly.
that you're in my life and we can have this conversation whenever time permits.
I
Yeah.
always tell people you're part of my tribe. You're part of
Yeah.
my tribe.
Yeah.
You're the tribe that's doing this right now. That's cool. It's
Yeah.
fine.
It's bloodline. Your
Yeah.
bloodline doesn't sever, and luckily we can choose our bloodlines now because we can get around so much more than we used to.
Yeah.
Even that again is the miracle of this technology. Even somebody who can't leave the house because they have some awful illness or who
Yeah.
has so many responsibilities that they can't take time for themselves, that person can still connect with the entire world, and it's wonderful.
One of the most popular internet people is Bedbound, and I can't remember her character's name. It's like something mouse, but
Mm.
she plays as an anime character. She does
Yeah,
an animated character because she doesn't want people seeing her in her bed,
no.
having a tube or anything like that. So she does herself as an anime character. I think it's beautiful.
Well, there's a whole tradition actually now, or not tradition because it's grown up very quickly, but there is a whole industry around people signing up with an agency in Japan, and I think Korea does this too, to act as an anime avatar. And they have software that maps the appearance they want onto them. And they
Wow,
actually appear on screen as this avatar, but as themselves. So if they sing, they sing. If they craft, they craft. If they just talk, they
that's what this
talk.
girl does.
But they
And
can hide behind this character. Or, to look at it the other way, they can express themselves better through this character than through the body they were given.
right,
And that's
yeah.
lovely. That's
I know
wonderful.
a fellow with ALS who's still writing scripts. I know there's if I can get into disability and stuff for days
Yeah.
too because that's my life. In real life, that is my life.
There are actually quite a lot of manga that explore different kinds of disability and different kinds of issues from all sorts of levels. I mean, there's a beautiful manga about a woman who has an autistic child and how she learns to cope with this autistic child from the time the child is a baby onwards, and how
Wow,
the world around her, through her experiences, learns to cope with this autistic child, and how
that's
she has to come to terms with the fact that not everybody in the world is prepared to cope with this autistic child. Yeah.
do you find given our age, we're from the same generation, that when you come to one of these conventions or fan events, do people look at you and go, well, I expected to see a 27-year-old and the little tutu and the big hats and
Sometimes
dressed up.
I have actually frequently been told, because I wrote my first book about anime in 1993, and I've published 13 books about anime, manga, craft related to anime, manga, of different things. I've published 13 books since, and people look at me and say,
And we're gonna list, your website and everything down so people can buy those books because I've been starting to read them because I'm amazed. So
well, I've got two more coming out next year, so thank you for the support now, including the
eh,
Manga Bible, which, if anyone else is listening to this for the first time and hearing about manga, it will give you the dope on the various controversies around where manga history starts and the idea of some good scholars to follow who will lead you on to other good people, and the stories of mangaka and companies and history and the latest things. I think we just about squeezed in the latest One Piece historical revelation
oh,
before
the
we
one
went to press.
I
So
love One
we
Piece.
found up
I
to,
I am a monkey fan of One Piece.
oh,
Yes,
it
I
is
have to
so
say.
sweet, isn't it? I mean, everybody
It-
there
I
is
wouldn't have heard of it if it wasn't for Netflix. I wouldn't have heard
yeah,
of it at all.
that's it.
And that got me into it. And now I play the video games of the, the One Piece
You know,
video
One
game.
Piece is the latest incarnation of a chain that starts with a guy called Akira Toriyama and a manga called Dragon Ball.
Uh-huh.
Because Eiichiro Oda, who does One Piece, is a huge Toriyama fan as a kid, and several other big mangaka like Naruto, the manga Naruto, comes from
Uh,
a fan of Dragon Ball. Bleach comes from a fan of Dragon Ball. So many. The guy who did Dragon Ball said he just wanted to draw a dumb manga about the things that interested him, which were essentially martial arts, fights, history, folklore, anything going on at the time. And so he
that's
created
what the show started. It's just stuff that interests me. So,
and so he created this cute little character who comes from Japanese folklore. He is Son Goku, the Monkey King, but who is
uh,
basically a complete innocent and who just wants to go out into the world and have fun and fight
yeah,
people, but not in any nasty way, in the way little boys fight. You know,
yeah,
let's see who's the best today. Yeah. And
yeah.
then go off home and have tea together and be fine.
Exactly. Let's share some ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so sweet and so lovely. And there's a lot of other things going on there as well. But essentially, it's about how you can be the strongest and the bravest and the toughest person in the world, and you can still be the nicest, sweetest, most open and giving person in the world. It's your choice.
Yeah.
It's all down to you, and that has inspired so many people. And I mean, the lovely thing with One Piece is that Luffy is that annoying kid and also
Uh-huh.
that sweet kid who will not give up on what he wants. And out there, he is following his dream and he wants everyone else to follow their dreams as well.
Everybody's got their own thing
Yeah,
and everything is nurtured. which I
And it's
love
fine,
too.
you want to go off and do something else and have fun, great. You want to come and
Yeah.
have fun with me on my ship, great. It's just all about we all get to do what we want, and we all
Yeah.
support each other's right to do that. And
I
as long
have
as
to ask,
yeah, long as you're not hurting anybody. Go on.
do you dress in costume when you go to the events?
No, no.
Aw.
I go generally because the big events that I've been to until the last election were
Yeah.
mostly in America and Canada. I'm still hoping
Uh-huh.
to go to more things in Canada. And there's this thing called the international baggage allowance,
Uh-huh.
and it sucks. It really sucks because I'm not at the level where people will pay for me to go first class, where I get 2 large suitcases plus 2 carry-ons. So everything that I'm taking with me has to
It's
go into 1 case and 1 carry-on.
what you can
And
afford, yeah.
difficult to do costumes. I mean, I have a Tudor that
Uh-huh.
packs flat. I have a flat pack Tudor, but it
Wow.
packs flat and it fills 1 baggage allowance, because by
Wow.
the time
You
you
have
go
to wear everything you're gonna wear at the event that
yeah,
day.
that's it, yeah. Because by the
Oh,
time you do the jewelry and the shoes and the wigs and
right.
the headpieces and all the underwear and the farthingale, Tudor is not
Where is my cummerbund? Where is my
that's it, and of course, that's the other thing too, you have to dress yourself in it unless you've got somebody with you who knows what they're doing.
See, that's my when I worked Renaissance fairs, that was always our thing. We'd always have a partner. You're helping me dress today. You're helping me dress. Get my sleeves.
I mean, I have not met the woman that can tighten her own corset.
Oh,
Yeah,
that would be somebody with the longest arms known to
yeah,
humanity.
exactly. And yet, how do you pin a sleeve on one-handed with the other arm opening up, holding up the sleeve when it weighs what most of these things weigh?
Oh, with the jewels and everything else, because I
Yeah.
would be an Italian noble and jewels
Oh, yeah,
everywhere. Oh, it was
dripping
in
with
raw
pearls.
silk, so you can't rip it because if you rip it, then you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
So
rip it, you're stuck with it for the rest of the weekend. Yeah.
that's right. Everybody's gonna go.
And it's weird how these things have changed because when I did Trek, my friend Barbara and I used to compete to see how many outfits we could fit in one small shopping bag. I think
But you could roll them up
my
because
record
mini
was
skirts
6,
were
but
this
I
big.
did I did cheat in that I only took 2 carried 1 pair of sandals and wore 1 pair of boots,
Well,
and
there you
they
go.
weren't strictly correct for all the outfits, but they did. But that way I got
That's amazing.
6 changes of costume.
That's
Um,
amazing.
but
I would just bring ears and be,
yeah. And be a Vulcan, yeah, I'm a Vulcan, I went down to Walmart and bought whatever you people wear, and this is it.
Exactly.
But and again, one of the other things with manga is that people look at the clothes, and because you got this book, I mean, most people get into manga by reading them in the weekly or monthly anthologies, but the
Mhm.
successful ones are very soon collected into collected volumes, which are mostly what we buy in Britain and in America and so forth. And
Mm,
so you've got a book there that is maybe 200 pages, and your character probably shows up in it. Unless you picked a very minor character, there's a good chance you got at least 30 or 40 pages of good drawings of your character. For costume
right.
research, that's incredible.
It's
You
amazing.
really can. And there's a wonderful manga called Golden Kamui, which is
Uh-huh.
about the Ainu people of the North Island of Japan. And the Ainu people have their own very specific folk costume and embroidery decorations and print decorations that are quite different from the rest of Japan. And
Just like Jeju in Korea. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
so many cosplayers can do Golden Kamui because can
Nice.
do Ainu because of Golden Kamui, because they can get so much detail from there. And of course, there's whole online communities where if you're struggling to find things, you can post. And it's just like the Renaissance one where you can say, "How would you do a French hood?" And the
Yeah.
question, of course, back to you is, "What era?"
Yeah, exactly. Are you talking 1560 to 1590? Are you talking
Exactly.
1440? Yeah,
But
exactly.
somebody will come up and say, "Right, this is what I normally do, and these are the sources I've got." And in fact, it is sadly the truth that there is no single contemporary source for how you wear a French hood at all, apart
Oh,
from partial glimpses in artwork, because who bothers to tell women how to do their hair? It's
right?
crazy. It's crazy. Girls just do it, right? French hood.
Right.
How would you expect? I'm a serious artist. How would you expect me to know how that goes together? And it's just the same in anime and manga. People say, right, I'm struggling with trying to get these particularly elevated, ornate armor shapes for
Right.
this particular costume. anyone give me any tips? And people will come on and say, well, I hope you're using Warbler because, you know, that makes it much easier. And
Yeah.
I hope you've made yourself a form like this because that makes it much easier.
Do
And
styrofoam and not clay. Yes, if you're going to
yeah,
do samurai, what type of paint you're going to use on your face.
yeah.
Yes.
And here's a video where you can see somebody doing, it's not the same thing, but it's something the same. So there's all that helpfulness there. I mean, I'm hoping to get back to North America for
Mm,
the Montreal Worldcon in 2027.
brilliant.
And if that
Brilliant.
happens, I've got a costume I want to do for it. And I have no idea technically how I'm going to do it because it is a 2500 BC Japanese costume.
Whoa.
And
So there has to be some historian out there who has to
I
know.
have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I got the costume from a terracotta figure in an exhibition in the British Museum about 10 years ago.
Wow.
There still isn't, I mean, the studies of Dogo, of these terracotta figures, are
Uh,
very dense and very detailed, but they don't go down to the things we want to know, like, well, how would they actually have made that set of trousers, that breastplate? It's, oh, well,
sure.
we don't know. We can date the terracotta for you, no problem.
But we don't know if they use this or this
That's it.
or they or this
Yeah,
or
that's it.
you know, yeah.
I'm hoping that I will be able to go to Montreal because, as you said earlier, we don't know if we're all going to be spared another week.
Ugh.
Um, and I'm hoping that I will be able to call on enough of my tribe to get this together and make it because it would be. And I've only done 2 Worldcon costumes,
Oh,
and I got a
that'd be fun.
best in show religious for one of them. But I
Not a Catholic nun, I'm guessing.
no,
No.
we did the triple goddess. We did the triple
Nice.
goddess morphing into a rock band at the end of the segment.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah. But, this may well be my last Worldcon because you never know. So I'm hoping to be able to do it and go out on a high. So
I
it's not manga, but it's manga adjacent.
it's Manga Jesus. It's Manga, yeah. It's a part. It's part of it.
Well, it has
Helen
actually appeared in
McCarthy.
manga.
Helen McCarthy, you are an absolute joy to talk with. And this hour has like gone by. And I'm wearing my hand braces on today, so I tell you I'm a little swollen, but I'm
Yeah,
still snapping. Uh, but I adore you. I absolutely adore you, and I know we're going to talk about more stuff later on in life,
yeah, I hope
and
so.
we'll do this again. But Helen, where do you get your stuff published through? Are you
I
on
have a
Amazon? Are you
range
on?
of publishers. I have a range of publishers. You can get them all on Amazon because you can get everything on Amazon. But what many people don't know is that there's an organization in Britain and in the States called bookshop.org in America.
Yes, that's where
And
I go.
they give money to your chosen bookshop if you ask them to and buy through
Yes,
them. And
yeah.
they are the most marvelous organization. But I never mind if people buy my books secondhand, that's great. You just get books the way you can get books. And
Yeah,
however people read
rent
them,
them.
fine. But
Like,
I have the Manga Bible coming out next year, and I also have a completely updated version of my 1999 book about Hayao Miyazaki, which will cover the
nice.
whole of his career, right up to The Boy and the Heron.
I'm
And
so
that
excited about that.
hasn't
I
been
actually I realized that one of your books is sitting over here, and I had not really
updated.
even realized that you are the author of that book I was reading not too long ago.
Oh, I've done a lot of odd things. I think my favorite actually is manga cross stitch. That was so much fun.
Oh, fun!
Well,
I adore
I'm a
you.
fanatic cross stitcher, and I'd seen
Oh,
so many people ripping off IP to make their patterns. And I'm not
yeah,
joking, but I wouldn't like it if I was the artist and it was done to me. So I
yeah.
set out with my partner, who's an artist, to make a book where they could make their own patterns without ripping anybody off, but
Oh,
still hit all the manga beats, hit the cute girls and the princesses and the fairies and the
the
little
big
baby
eyes.
characters and the animals and of course the gorgeous dragons and all the other stuff and the giant robots. I love giant robots. But no,
Oh, of
thank
course.
you so much for having me to talk, and thank you for getting a word in edgeways. Because the
Oh
one
no, this is great because usually I'm the one stepping all over everybody else. This is I am appreciative of everything you have talked about today, and I know we are definitely going to continue this conversation at another time. But I we have taken up an hour of your life, and I think we're going to be doing a lot of reading after this interview because man, you are exciting and make you just make me really hungry for more
oh, thank you.
of
I love
the
that. And I'm like, My ambition in life has always been, I met a lot of gatekeepers. You know gatekeepers in fandom and
Yes.
gatekeepers in the job world. Women meet a lot
Yes.
of gatekeepers. My ambition was always to be the person that shoved the door open, not the person that held it shut.
Yes. Definitely. And you, Helen McCarthy, have been on the Antisocial Hour-ish show for this week, and you have opened a huge, huge door. And next week, everybody, we're going to have a Poxy Boggart. We're going to have a fellow who sings Renaissance fair
Oh, wow.
songs of the dirty nature.
Oh,
So that will be our next conversation.
oh,
But this
that'll
has
be
been a
wonderful.
wonderful, I know, this has been a wonderful chat with our Helen McCarthy, and we'll see you next week.